morning.
Let me sign that. Is this your first year in Abbott? Third year, okay. You're next year.
Alright guys, there are a few assignments that you are supposed to have finished, and we've got an opportunity here for me to give you some last second questions about that. So if you look under bell work, there's two things you need to be getting out of your binder. It's fine if y'all don't want to do that before the bell rings, but once the bell rings, I need you to move that way. So that'd be number 4 and number 5. Number 4 was the book assignment. I think most of you guys finished that in class last time, so I doubt that you're going to have questions on that later. But if you do, this is your last chance, because we have our quiz next class, which will be on Monday. And part of your classwork/homework was doing one of those worksheets for number 5. And we're actually going to start off with the very last question. Quite a few people, well, it's a hard question, and quite a few people try to ask questions on that on Wednesday and Thursday. I have pre-cal on Thursday too. But I'd like you to hold off so we can talk about it together. But while you get that out, I will put in attendance real quick. Okay, so I want to go ahead and start off with question 10 on that practice quiz. So this was the only question that wasn't just a direct, you saw this in your notes, you practiced it in your book assignment, etc. So it was the only one that asked you to do some sort of extension. But if it is on a practice quiz, or your notes, or your book assignment, any of that stuff would be fair game for a quiz. So can't be, or it is a very bad idea to be dismissive of that. So, all right, this one wants us to find the distance between Fayetteville, that has a certain latitude, and Kansas City, that has a different latitude. Assume the Earth is this big and the cities are on the same longitude. So I think a big part of this is sketching a picture and kind of sketching the picture that they're hoping that you do. So you've got Earth like this. You've got two cities that have the same longitude. So I kind of imagine if I just turn the Earth, so if they're on the same longitude, I just want to turn them to where they're on the very edge. They're like at the very corner of what I'm looking at the Earth. Now, even though I guess I don't have to make this super accurate, because this is really for me, I know 0 degrees is here, so 34-ish degrees is going to be about here. This is going to be Fayetteville. And 39-ish degrees is going to be up here. This is Kansas City. So if we want to know the distance between these cities, It's not quite as simple as just like the distance formula in geometry, because you can't really just go straight from this to this. If you're going a long distance, you have to worry about this curvature of the Earth. But since this is part of the distance around a circle, what do we call that in math? One more time. Arc length. So circumference is all the way around. Arc length is part of the way around. So if you don't make your picture that way, or if, I don't know, you try to make it a different way and you kind of get stuck, I feel like that's kind of a big hurdle there. But we're going to throw those cities on the Earth. We're going to turn the Earth so those cities are just kind of on the very edge. And I can see that really what I want to know is arc length. So the first tie-in is, if you want to know arc length, you're supposed to know S equals R theta. You needed that for questions, for other questions in 1 through 9. And so you only need to know two things to get the answer here. You need to know the radius of your circle, or in this case, the radius of the Earth, which was given to us, and that central angle. So basically, how much does the angle have to open up to go from Fayetteville to Kansas City? So how much of an angle would there be if Kansas City's at 39 degrees, 47 minutes, 52 seconds, and Fayetteville's at 34 degrees, 30 minutes, and 52 seconds? How are we supposed to go about maybe finding this angle between them? Okay, let me simplify the numbers. Let's say that this was at 30 degrees and this was at 35 degrees. Then how much of an angle would they have between them? 5. You're just going to subtract them, right? The problem is, subtracting degrees, minutes, and seconds from degrees, minutes, and seconds, first off, it is possible, but it's kind of a pain to do. So what you really need to do to subtract those is you need to say, well, Kansas City is here, but we know how to change this to a decimal. Another skill that shows up in one of the previous questions. So we've got 34 full degrees plus 30 over 60, because a minute is a 60th of a degree, plus 52 over 3600, because a second is a 3600th of a degree. And actually, I will show you what I'm doing here, because there is, even those of you that got the question right or very close to right, there's something I want you to learn out of this. A calculator tip that a lot of students usually don't know before pre-cal. Okay, so I know it's going to be just a touch bigger than 34. You throw that in your calculator, you get this. Okay, so if you tried this one last time, which you should have, you're supposed to try all of them between now and this class. I totally understand why you guys want to round that. You don't want to keep up with all of those decimals. Problem is, if we start rounding before we're at the end of the question, our final answer gets further and further away from where it's supposed to be. So there's a way to store this information in your calculator without you trying to keep up with 8 or 9 decimals all the time. So, did y'all ever use this store button in Algebra 2? No? Okay. So once you have the number that you want, hit this button right above on, STO arrow, and it puts a little arrow on the screen. And then what we can do is we can store this into any letter we want. So since this is supposed to be the angle of Fayetteville, I'm going to store it as F. Most of the time I just store in for X, but for me to keep up which one this is, I want to do alpha F and then hit enter. Now, anytime I say to my calculator F, it keeps up with that exact amount. It knows exactly what F is without any rounding. So it's about 34.514. Let me write this on my page. But I called this guy F, so I'm putting this on my page. I know approximately what it is, but my calculator knows it as F. Anytime I say F, it knows that. And you don't have to worry about that being in the way or anything. If you ever want something else to be F, you just store it in for F. It doesn't mess up anything else. Okay, but we need to do the same thing with Kansas City. So we need to change 39 degrees, 47 minutes, and 52 seconds. To just a decimal. So again, you're really supposed to know how to do this for other questions anyway. But we've got 39 full degrees. A minute is a 60th of a degree, and a second is a 3600th of a degree. Once again, if you just take that rounded amount, if you round that and move on, your answer is going to be close, but it's not going to be quite. And you guys are almost to the point of calculus, and those small differences are very impactful. All right, I don't want to keep up with all 8 or 9 decimals, so I'm going to store this in for something else. I don't want to store it in for F because it's going to overwrite what I stored in for the Fayetteville angle. I'm going to call it K for Kansas City. Now, anytime I type in K in my calculator, it knows exactly, not close, but exactly what angle I'm talking about. So back on my paper, just for my knowledge here, I'm going to say, well, it's about 39.798 degrees, but I stored that in for K. Okay, so to move forward here, I had oversimplified this. I said if this was like 30 and this was 35, you guys told me that this angle would have to be 5. I care about how much is this angle having to open up. Well, now that I know Kansas City is here and Fayetteville is there, I can subtract those two, the angle at Kansas City minus the angle at Fayetteville, and since I have those stored in my calculator, I can type it in that way. Kansas City minus Fayetteville. And again, they're keeping up with the exact amount. So the angle between those is about 5.283. And I'm going to store that angle in for X. Again, I don't want to round anything. About 5.283. I'm going to store that for X. All right, so I know how big this angle is between here, so you're going to be tempted to throw that in for theta. You're going to be tempted to multiply that by 4,000 and say that you're done. But there was something special about this formula. What would be wrong about putting this in my calculator now?
Oh, it needs to be in radians.
All right, this is an easy formula to use, but this has to be in radians. So I don't want to quite do that. I need to change this degrees to radians. So I'm going to multiply by pi over 180. Now I still have that in my calculator, so times pi divided by, oops. I was saying it correctly, but I wasn't typing it in correctly. Sorry. Times pi divided by 180. Okay, so it was this many degrees, but it's this many radians. I'm still not at the end of the question, so I should not be rounding yet. So I'm going to store this in for X. You can store it in for any letter you want to, just the X button's easy. So notice I stored something else in for X earlier. I just don't need that anymore, so I don't care. So this is about 0.092 radians. 0.092 radians. So arc length is R times theta. I've had R from the beginning. Theta, I had to think of Kansas City and Fayetteville as decimals so I could subtract them, but then it only works in the formula if it's a radian, so you have to convert it to a radian. And then finally, if I throw all this in my calculator, 4,000 times this angle, (4,000) times what I stored in for X. I have not rounded one single time yet, so that answer is just about perfect. Except that the question I think asked you to round to the nearest mile, So we're looking at 369 miles if you're rounding to the nearest mile. About 369 miles. So it's great if you can use this formula. It's great if you can convert degrees to radians. It's great if you can change degrees, minutes, and seconds to decimal degrees. You're going to get a handful of points for all of those things. But if you don't know how to pull all these things together to be able to work different question types, then it's really not all that useful. So that's why we really like this. It's like 1, 2, 3, 4 to 5 different things you're supposed to be able to do for the first 9 questions, show up all in one question. So if you got stuck on that one, that's totally understandable, especially at the start of the year. I didn't give you really any hints other than to try to make a picture. But the worksheet B, which I will ask you to do in class today, has another one on question 10, so now you should have a general idea of how to approach that one. So, question 10, is there anything about this I went over too quickly? Anything you want to ask more deeply about? I'm not trying to give you a hint about whether this is on the quiz or not, but again, if it's a practice quiz, then you should expect it to be on the quiz, so make sure you're prepared either way. No? Did anybody get that in here without any hints last time? One? Okay. All right. Y'all feel like you can do it on the other worksheet now, though? You kind of see the process? Okay. While we have this one out, let's just go ahead and take questions from this. Again, I don't think you guys are going to have many, if any, book questions, but so part of your classwork / homework was to do this 4.1 worksheet. You didn't have to do the B version until today in class, and to check your answers. So if this was your quiz and you did this without notes, it gives you a good idea of where you stand, what questions you need to ask about, what questions you need to review. And you should do about the same. If you got half of these right and you don't put any more effort in, you're probably going to make about a 50 on the quiz. It's not. We're pretty transparent on that part. We have high expectations, but we are pretty transparent. So what questions, other than number 10, of course, because we just went through that whole thing, what questions can I help with from this worksheet, if any? Yep.
So on question 1B, I'm still kind of confused on like the number of radians that are on the terms of pi, like how to
Okay.
determine what quadrant they're in.
So first off, how do you know this is radians?
Because there's no units.
All right, no units implies that it's radians. Well, it just kind of depends on what you're trying to do here. If you're trying to convert this to degrees, you still do it the same way. You multiply it by 180 over pi. If you just want to know what quadrant this lands in, you've got some options. So I would say one possibility, we do allow a calculator on this quiz, is you could convert this to degrees, which you can see we will ask you to do anyway. And do you know where 212 degrees lands? Okay, well then you could do that to answer this question. 212 is in quadrant 3. And or, the nice thing about trig 2, as we get into this in a few weeks, everything in trig is connected. There's lots of times in trigs where I might say, you know, here's how I would work this question, and you might be able to work it a different way with other stuff that we've done. But another way that I would probably do it, how many radians is directly to the left? One's up here. How many radians is
3.14.
okay, also known as pi. Pi is about 3.14. So if from here to here is about 3.14 radians, then 3.7 is going to be a little bit bigger than that. I don't know exactly, but I know enough to know that it would land in quadrant 3. So just a second way to think about it. Okay, somebody else have another one from our first practice quiz? You're going to have to get your phone put up, or I'm going to take it. I didn't say anything the first time. That's it? Okay. All right, scan through your book assignment real quick. Make sure that there's nothing that you want to ask. I tried to come around on Wednesday and make sure that all of those questions were answered before y'all moved on to the worksheet, but everyone was at a different place, so it is possible that you might have another book question. And you guys need to make sure that you ask your questions here, because on Monday when we do the quiz will be first thing in the morning. So it's not, hey, can I ask these couple questions real quick? The answer will be no. This is your chance to ask questions. You should have already done your book work. You should have already done the worksheet. You should know which questions you need to ask. So if you have them, that's great. Please ask. But I don't take questions right before quizzes and tests. Problem is, it just messes our timing up too much. If I let you ask 2 minutes for questions, it doesn't seem like a big deal, but then I have to let everybody ask questions, and then we get behind. So I don't mind answering your questions, but just heads up, I'm not taking questions before the quiz on Monday. Okay, so book questions. You guys are awake? This is not even 0 hour. I didn't put this on the get to know me thing, but I've always taught 0 hour every year we've had it, which is like 8 or 9 years or something. So this is very different for me I'm used to start teaching at 7:15. Starting at 8:30 is very different. Yeah. All right, 35 gives us degrees and wants us to convert these to radians as a multiple of pi. All right, so to convert degrees to radians, you have to have memorized what the process is going to be. Going to multiply by pi over 180 degrees. And so if I do this, 120 degrees times pi over 180 degrees, multiply your fractions together and reduce. You can see that the degrees cancel. You could divide both of these by 10. You could divide both of these by 6. And then there's your answer, 2 pi thirds. All the units went away, so now I know it's in radians. All the degrees canceled out.
So you always just have to do pi over 100.
If it's degrees to radians. If it's radians to degrees, it's 180 over pi. That's where I think it helps to actually think about the units, because then you're not trying to memorize when is pi in the numerator and when is pi in the denominator. So same thing over here. We could do negative 20 times pi over 180, multiply across the top, multiply across the bottom. The degree symbols cancel out. All of our units are gone, so it's in radians. We could divide both the numerator and the denominator by 10 and by 1. Now, we do have to be cautious of the directions here. If the direction said round to 3 decimal places, I would have just expected you to just throw all this in your calculator and tell me something, something, dot, 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 something. I can be more specific than that. I would expect you to say, this one, 2.094 radians. But the book said not to round to 3 decimal places. That's why I didn't do that. It said leave your answer in terms of pi. So I just left pi in my answer. I didn't multiply it in. Likewise over here, if this one said round to 3 decimal places, I would have just thrown this in the calculator. And said about negative 0.349. But it didn't say round. It said leave your answer in terms of pi. So, yes.
For B,
Uh-huh.
the 20 degrees, I think is actually so.
Oh, yeah. I went too quickly here. And actually, I was going to say one more thing about kind of a slick way to check your work. I do have an arithmetic mistake right here. I divided both of these by 10, and then this should have been 18 when I did that. And then divide both by 2, so this should be 9. That's what you were saying?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, here's what I was going to suggest to y'all, since this is a calculator quiz, and this would have caught my mistake. Even though this question doesn't say round to 3 decimal places, you can do 120 times pi over 180. And you might think that this is worthless as an answer because it doesn't say round. But what did I get an answer of on part A? You'll have to tell me so I don't flip back and forth. 2 pi over 3.
Yeah.
So if I type this in and hit enter, the calculator is going to show me the decimal, right? Shouldn't these be the same decimal if I did it correctly? So the fact that those are the exact same decimal makes me feel pretty good about part A. Part B, was it negative 20? Again, it did not ask you to round, so you should not circle this as your final answer. But if I practice what I preach here, the first answer I got was this, where I had a mistake. These aren't the same decimal, so this tells me that this shouldn't be my final answer. These aren't equivalent. That would at least tell me to go back and check my work. Then, after I went back and fixed it, now the decimals are the same. So sometimes working it both ways is beneficial, even though the directions only ask for it this way. Okay, last call. Anybody else have something else from the book?
Question 40. Actually, no.
Are you sure?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so next up, let's talk. This morning, I opened up some of these in Google Classroom for you to turn in. So we need to talk about the grading of these so that you don't feel like you're caught off guard. We did that. Okay, so go ahead on your bookwork. I need you to just do this real quick because this is the process you need to go through. First off, you need to scan your assignment. Make sure that you didn't miss any questions. You didn't skip anything and forget to go back to it. Make sure you have the vocab check. And you need to be sure that you checked your answers at some point. If you've got a bunch of wrong answers and you never bothered to check your work, then that's not following through on the homework. But if it's fully complete and your answers are correct, you will get 100 points on that homework assignment. I spend about 10 seconds glancing through it. I just try to see, did you skip anything? Do you not know how to do anything? Even if it's just one question, you had a chance to ask, so you should have asked. But for homework grades, at least in pre-cal for me and Ms. Thomas, we only give 3 different grades. So you would get a 0 if I never saw it. That's the only way to get a 0. You get automatic 100 points if it looks like you did it all and I don't notice that you did some of it incorrect. So like if you just, if everybody else did 5 steps on the last question and you don't have any steps and your answer just doesn't even make sense, that's not going to cut it. But otherwise, automatic 100. But anything in between is half credit. So the only way students feel gypped here is if, I only didn't do a question or 2. Why am I getting half credit? Well, because that was part of what you were supposed to do. You had a chance to ask questions, and it makes it transparent, and you know what your score is going to be before you turn it in. So, as long as you don't make a habit out of that, it's not a big deal. But if I can tell that you didn't do some of it, or you did some of it without fidelity, you didn't check your answers and make corrections, in the 10-15 seconds I'm glancing at it, then you will get half credit. But otherwise, it's easy, automatic 100. But I like to be transparent there so you don't feel like you're caught off guard. Even the vocab check. Now, of course, there's sometimes we make adjustments. Like, I think it was number 5 in the vocab check. Isn't that the one I said you didn't have to do? So I don't expect you to go do that one. I told you that you're not on the hook for that one. That's fine. But everything else, you better have the other vocab checks. You better have the other ones. And then automatic 100. Now, I guess, of course, everyone has stuff that comes up, and sometimes you may forget to finish something. You may forget to go back and do a question. I get that, but if you just do that a couple times in the semester, it shouldn't be enough to lower your grade at the end. So as long as it's not, you don't make a habit out of it, I don't think it should be that big of a deal. Also, I'll remind you about late work. So I will expect to have this in Google Classroom before we start the quiz on Monday. So in just a couple minutes, some of you guys might want to just take your pictures and turn those in. I do take late work up till the unit assessment. So once we get to the first test on that review day, I will remind you guys, if there's something that you didn't turn in the first time, if you go back and fully complete it, you can still get half of your points back. But it also works if you turn in something that you get partial credit on. If you only get half credit because you forgot to do some of it, you can go back and finish it and you can get half of your points back, but only up until our first test. Realistically, you need to do all of this before the first quiz. That's the whole point of this, is to get some practice and opportunities to ask questions. So, but that's the other part. Okay with that? Okay. All right, so in Google Classroom, y'all can split one of two ways. Google Classroom, I may not give grades for all of these, but the ones I'm likely to give grades for were the notes, number 3, the book assignment, number 4, and number 5, when you have both of those finished, worksheet 1 and worksheet B. So if you have all of those finished, or some of those finished, you're welcome to get your phone out, take pictures, put them into Google Classroom, double check that all the files are attached before you hit submit. And the nice thing about Google Classroom is I can't promise to always do this, but I try to start putting those grades in early because it makes my life easier. So let's say that you turn in all 3 of those right now, and this afternoon I get a chance to grade some of them. If I notice that you're missing a page on your homework, I will try to put that in the comments, and then you've got a chance to resubmit it before it's due. So sometimes I can help you all catch that you messed something up like that up, but please consider doing that. Okay, so feel free to do that. Turn those in. If you don't want to do them during class, that's fine. If you want to do them during advisory, that's okay. If you want to turn them in over the weekend, that's fine too. But of course, you're likely to forget the longer you wait. So feel free to do those now with your phone if you want to. The only other practice assignment is I need you to finish up the rest of number 5. Those are the 2 worksheets I gave you last class. I told you you only had to do the first one, the first practice quiz. But now that you guys have had notes, time to ask questions, practice it in the book assignment, you've done a practice quiz, we've gone over the hardest question on the practice quiz. Now you've got one more practice quiz unless you worked ahead. And so this is really, if you really are ready to do well on the quiz, then you should not have any issues with worksheet B. So move on to one of those 2 things, start turning those in, or worksheet B. And then you can, once you've got those things done, those are the only things I have to have from you guys today. So you can use the rest of your class time to look your stuff over and study. And in just a few minutes, I'll come around and help out. So if there's something popping up that you want clarification on, you'll have a chance to ask.
Teachers, pardon this brief interruption at this time. Today, at 8 a.m., you received an email from Dr. Miller. At this point in time, kind of stop what you're doing, go to the email and count the number of students sitting in your classroom at this time, per grade. That we're going to do 4 times today. I'll come on 3 other times today and make the reminder. But at this time, count the number of students sitting in your classroom per grade and submit that on that Google document that Dr. Miller sent at 8 a.m. this morning. Thank you very much.
The what?
So like, all of it.
Well, the book where you can check all the odd answers in the back of the book. Really, I would suggest they do that as you work through the time. If you're doing something wrong, I don't think you have to go back and redo a bunch of it. For even answers, you can pull up the videos on my website. Go to the end, see if the answers match up. And then for the practice quizzes, those are on my website too. Those are easy ones that you check.
No.
Okay. You ready to take a quiz? Or you want to study anything? Okay. Worksheet B, alternative Google Classroom. Okay. You don't need to review any of the study? Okay. That's fine, I'm just making sure that I would hate for you to waste your time. Yeah. Signed up. As long as it's not the first 10 minutes of class or last 10 minutes, that you can help yourself. Okay, I will come back around here in just a bit. But just like 4.1 worksheet, 4.1 worksheet B, you'll definitely need to check your answers. That's the point of the practice quiz. Again, we don't do a practice quiz every single section, so you need to utilize that as an extra aid there. If you're missing half of it, I want you to figure it out today and not when you get your quiz back. Also, we have a fire drill today during advisory, so just a heads up. Okay, and I'm going to start grading a couple of these things on Google Classroom. And I will come back around and help you guys again, or offer to help again. But just so y'all know, if y'all do get to something, I can do this stuff later, so my main priority is answering your questions. So if you get to something you want some help on, raise your hand or bring it up here, whatever's easier for you. You don't have to wait for me to come around the room.
like when I first did it, I forgot to put pi there, but how do I get it in terms of pi? Because when I just multiply it together, I just got numbers.
Okay, well, do the same thing, but don't multiply in pi. So do 12 times 7 divided by 6 only.
That's 14.
Okay, and then leave pi in your answer, so 14 pi.
Alright.
Revenues up there dropped. I try not to set anybody in C just because I hate putting C in this turn, so if you would rather set in C, you can. You're fine. Just want to give you the option.
There's no like one more time how to convert this to numbers.
And when you convert them all, times 180, or times 180 over pi. Same way you did, like down here. You're converting radians to degrees. That's radians. So just throw all that in your calculator.
And that's what I did, but that's I don't know. I can see. Do I need to do it as a fraction?
Okay, wait. You got radians, you want degrees. So you need to be multiplying by 180 over pi, not pi over 180. Sometimes it's one way, sometimes it's the other. That's why you gotta think about what you have and what you want.
I get that.
Yeah. See, when I know I have degrees, if I have so many degrees and I want radians, I know I want this to cancel out and go away. So that's how I know to put the 180 in the bottom in that case. But if it's radians, I put the pi in the bottom. And then I'm not trying to memorize when to do which one. the same. Like, I don't make all the solutions, some of these are like, been around forever. But all the person did was go from here to here, they got a common denominator to push them together, but that's not more simplified than that is, so I think that's a bad idea, because what if you mess that stuff up? Yeah, either one's fine.
So, I got 225.
Okay.
Coterminal, but I need to convert it back into radians.
Okay.
I'm trying to answer in fractions, so usually I put it won't be in fractions.
That's because when you multiply it in pi, it's creating a decimal, and that decimal's got a hard time. So instead, just do this, do 225 divided by 180. So we're ignoring the pi for just a second. Okay, change that to a fraction. Okay, and then just remember that you didn't put pi in your calculator. So your answer is 5 pi over 4.
Okay, so it's, okay. So it's the
Five.
same as the question.
Oh, but it wants a coterminal. That's not what that means. You're converting it, which you can if you want to, but that's not what coterminal means. Coterminal means you're in the same place at the same time. So you need to add a revolution or subtract a revolution. Just different skill. Anybody else got a question or two I can help with? Okay.
What time is this go so?
10 o'clock. You can take a picture of the schedule if you don't have one.
Just so you know, I'm gonna have to leave a little bit early because I'm going to a chiropractor appointment because my
Okay.
shoulder's messed up.
All right, they'll call and check you out. What'd you do to your shoulder?
I was sailing and they like,
Sailing?
yeah, and I pulled the cam lock broke. It's what keeps the line from going in and out. And it pulled really hard as I was
And you
pulling.
tried to hold on to it?
And it tore my rotator cuff. So
Did it hurt, or did you even notice?
I didn't really
Hmm.
notice. It wasn't like super painful. It was just like whenever I like laid down and I did this, and you can probably hear it. And
Yeah.
It's like a really loud pop.
Well, at least it didn't hurt too much in the moment. I guess that was this summer you did that?
Yeah.
Sure.
For this one, do we keep it in terms of pi or keep going to get it
If
fully
it,
to radians?
only if it says
Multiples of
legion.
pi?
Yeah, so
Or-
this one you need to actually multiply that
Okay.
by pi in your calculator.
Okay, perfect. I just want to make sure.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's okay if I sit back there where I can charge my computer.
Sure. For right now.
Sorry. Okay, I think I was able to check all of the Google Classroom stuff that has already been turned in. Again, that's not due and late until Monday when class starts. But even just checking the 10 people or so that turned stuff in, there was one person who didn't submit one of the pages of their work. So in the comments, I put that, and so I don't even remember who it was. But if you check your email, if you got that comment from me, then because you turned it in early and I happen to have time to check them, it's an easy fix for you. You can still attach it, and as long as I get it before we start class on Monday, you will still get full points. If you realize that after the fact, after I've already checked it and notified you, and if you don't check your email and you don't submit it by Monday, then you'll end up getting half credit on that assignment. So be careful of that. Likewise, there was one person on the worksheets. I noticed one question they hadn't worked yet, and so I stopped looking there. But I told them in comments, I saw there was at least one question that you didn't have worked out. So that person has the opportunity to go back, check it, work it out, resubmit it, and you can still get full points.
Did you
But
put the grades in?
for the ones I saw, I did, yeah. If you started submitting after I started checking, though, there's a chance you may have turned them in. But yeah, I already started putting grades in. Again, that helps me a little bit because I have less to grade on Monday. And it helps me check if you may not be set up to get full credit on something and give you that feedback. But just make sure that, in general, you guys really make sure that you're really submitting all the stuff, all the pages. I think it's pretty hard to turn something in with a missing question because if you're checking your answers, it just feels like it would be hard. But anyway, I communicate that to you, so you should have an email if that relates to you. Otherwise, you should see your score in gradebook unless you submitted those after I started. So. Also, since this is a little bit more laid back, you guys still have about 30 minutes till you're dismissed. So I'm going to come around again, so feel free to call me over if you have any questions. But this might be a good opportunity as well for those of you that are finished or almost finished to make sure that your binder's all caught up. You should have 5 things in there now. Most of them should be numbered because I numbered several of them for you. But just making sure all 5 are in order would be a good idea. You don't want to wake up on week 4 and feel like you're already unorganized. So now would be a good time to just reset and make sure you got the first 5 things in order.
You can't log in that grade yet. It says that the district doesn't have access to home access.
There's a new link to GradeViewer this year. It's slightly different. I don't know what the
It's
difference
like
is.
23 instead of like 40 or what it was.
20.
Yeah, that was okay. Yeah, I see it.
Yep. Okay. Yeah. Are you just now submitting it? Yeah. So what will happen is, if it's my fault, like if I scan this and I didn't see these and I give you half credit, obviously you can ask me about it and I can say, oh, I didn't see the last question, and you say, oh, well, they were there. And if they were there the whole time, I'll still give you the full points. It was my mistake. That does happen sometimes because I do check it pretty quickly, but.
So you can check the notes on the textbook. I mean, not the notes,
You can check all the audiences.
how do you get into the textbook?
You get into the view open it. There's not online. No, I said on mine, so like here, I have all the questions worked out. So like if you wanted to check 45, you could click it, not necessarily watch the whole video, but you could go to the end and see if you end up with the same answer as me. And since the back of the book doesn't have even answers, that's pretty much what you need to do for those. But we try not to give you too many evens. No, since y'all have a book at home and you always have a book in class, and like if you know you're gonna have book work that you want to do like an advisory, I'll usually like suggest y'all just take a couple pictures of the pages you're gonna need, and that's usually enough. Where you don't need an online textbook. And of course, you guys should want to do well on your first quiz, but also just a heads up that this will end up being about 1/3 of your first test. So if you're really prepared well for this quiz, you should get a good quiz grade. And when your first test rolls around, you should feel like you're pretty solid on the first third of the content. So. So what do supplement angles add up to? Supplementary angles. Okay, so I would write an equation. I would say what, so x, could you add to 1/5? Okay, now that's radians, so we don't want to say 180 because we don't want to mix radians and degrees. So how many radians is 180 degrees? Okay, so just say pi. This pi. No, equals pi. What angle can you add to 1/5 radians to get the pi radians? Pi is what it means to add up to a supplement. Now you've got a 1/5 equation. Just subtract your 1/5 over, and your answer is pi minus a fifth. We have a couple of those in the notes. You might want to look back at those examples too. That's it. Don't do anything else with it. Because if you took this angle, pi minus a fifth, add this angle to it, 1/5, you get pi, which is what it means to be supplementary.
I still have to throw this.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. So
Okay.
I wrote it down like this, theta, and then 12 inches, because it says 12 inches intersected by a central angle.
That just means like if this central angle, it's like the part of the circle it matches up with.
Oh, okay.
That's and then it's express your terms in terms of pi.
Well, this formula is only going to work in radians, right? So when you change this to radians, you're going to have pi in your answer.
yeah.
That's what they're expecting.
Okay, thank you.
Hello? Okay, I'll let him know. Thank you. Have a nice weekend.
Give them a chance to recharge a bit.
I usually hear first semester's not too bad.
Yeah, it's all basically review. It's
I never learned any chemistry. I did physics classes instead.
Physics.
I always heard physics was a little bit more math heavy than chemistry, and I always liked math, so I just went.
I took physics instead of chemistry last year, and it was a big mistake. I almost failed physics. It was way too hard for me.
Physics is pretty tough, yeah.
But Mr. Reeves is a good teacher.
He was my teacher. For physics back in the day. Mhm. Yeah, he looks exactly the same too. Well, yeah, exactly. Back then though, I don't think we had AP physics back then. It was just physics for everybody. So that may have made my class a little bit easier. I'm not very good at physics, but too many formulas and variables. And I don't know which one is terrible at. On the odd ones, you're always welcome to borrow one that looks over there. It's a lot quicker to just look in the back.
Or y'all are basically doing the same thing, like if one person opens up, y'all want to say you're supposed to answer it. It's fine too. Is Chad your brother? Never had him in class, but I knew who he was.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Why? How'd you? He's just not everywhere.
I don't know. Did he take freak out?
Actually, he was always ahead of math for me. Geometry and algebra, and I think he used to get free calculus.
Oh, okay.
But maybe I'm wrong. Actually, no,
I mean, there's 2 pre-cal teachers and 2 calculus teachers, so I just
Yeah.
didn't get in, but
yeah, I think he took calc, AP, and
DC would be Miss Cross for sure. She's the only teacher.
yeah.
The AB, she doesn't have time to have.
I have no idea who that is.
Well, I know I didn't have him, but.
Yeah.
Or when did he? How many years ago did he graduate?
2.
Oh, 2, yeah.
Yeah, he graduated the year before last. I had other brothers, I don't know. But, I don't know. I have no idea what the juniors they had. Like,
Well, I've only been doing calculus for like 4 years, so if they're much older, they probably either had Miss Cross or Mr. Robinson.
Robinson sounds familiar.
Yeah.
They never tell me.
Mr. Robinson was here for a long time, but he finally retired.
Yeah, like I know they had like this Bogart, like
Mhm.
all the math teachers they've had like are gone.
Ms. Bogart left us just a couple years ago.
Yeah.
Did you have her?
I think she left like right before.
You had her last year? Are you the one that scared her off?
No, she's actually pretty nice to me.
Oh, she's very nice. Yeah. But she does expect a lot more than some teachers do.
Did you only have my sister? My older sister. You didn't have her while you were Will.
You gotta tell me, what's your last name again?
For a little.
I only had Mary Larkin.
Okay, yeah.
I think, so some of our good friends, I don't know if you know them, but I think maybe some of your family does. Susie Swindle.
Name sounds familiar.
Okay. She's a good college friend of ours that we see a lot. She got married like a year or 2 ago. And I remember some of your family being at like the reception thing. So. Yeah. Mary Larkin was in my pre-cal class. I don't know that she really loved math, but she was good at it. Like if she never struggled.
She doesn't love it that much. But
Yeah. What is she doing these days?
She just got a job up for Walmart. She actually in May she graduated from the Clinton School with Master's in Public Service,
Okay.
and so she's up at Walmart. I don't know exactly what she's doing, but she just started her job up in Bentonville. So,
Yeah. I've heard working for Walmart can be kind of ruthless sometimes, so
yeah,
hope she
she's
likes
like
it.
it's like for like a Walmart like foundation that they have. So it's like a non-profit that she's working for or something, and she's like a manager of like some section of it.
Good for her.
No, it's like, you know, I want to say it's something for like literacy. It's like a non-profit for literacy, like helping literacy rates or something. I don't know.
Yeah. People probably, it's probably like schools apply for grants
Yeah.
and like, please give us this much money and this is what we would do with it.
Yeah.
And she's probably like part of deciding who gets money. And
Yeah.
It's interesting.
Yeah.
I don't know if I would have guessed that for her. Wasn't she also like in the theater or
Yeah,
something?
she majored in theater in college.
Okay.
And so a lot of her friends like moved to New York and LA and stuff, trying to get like acting jobs and stuff. And she was like, and
That's ruthless though.
yeah, and she graduated right as COVID hit. She like her freshman or like senior year was sort of that, and she was like, I don't want to move up there,
Yeah.
and so she decided just to stay here and go to homeschool instead.
She's all over the place then. Good at math,
Yeah.
loved theater, and now she works at Walmart. Just shotgun approach.
Yeah.
Okay, we've got about 4 minutes here, so if you guys are still working on something, that's fine, but you might try to finish up your thought. I highly suggest that you guys make a note to yourself about our quiz on Monday morning. Even if you don't feel like you need to study for an hour or something, you know, just a 5-10 minute refresher would probably go a long way. So if you got a planner, put it in your planner or put an alarm in your phone, something to just remind yourself about that. And then you should have emails about the Google Classroom stuff. So if you didn't already turn those in, make sure you do that before class starts on Monday.